You're listening to Switched On Australia, the podcast that tracks the opportunities and challenges of electrifying everything, everywhere. Switched On is brought to you by the publishers of Renew Economy, Australia's best informed, most read website focusing on the green energy transition, and is supported by Boundless Earth. Boundless Earth uses philanthropy, investment and direct advocacy to help Australia become a global force in a decarbonised world. Hello and welcome to Switched On Australia. I'm Anne Delaney. If you've ever spent Saturday arvo at a football oval, you'll know how deeply sport is woven into the social fabric of this country. But climate change is reshaping this favourite pastime. From unbearable heat to washed-out seasons, from damaged ovals to soaring power bills, climate change is already affecting how and whether communities can keep playing. Since Black Summer in Victoria in late 2019, it's estimated nearly 600 community AFL clubs have needed emergency assistance because their grounds, their clubrooms or their entire facilities have been hit by fires, floods or extreme weather. And my guest today has been watching these impacts unfold up close and helping clubs respond. Lex Lynch is the CEO of Footy for Climate. This is an organisation that connects two things Australians care about, the game and our future. Footy for Climate isn't just raising the alarm, they're installing solutions. Their Power Forward program is helping clubs cut emissions, slash bills and stay resilient by rolling out solar, batteries and practical adaptation measures, all powered by players, fans and volunteers. They're aiming to get solar and batteries onto 500 community clubhouses by 2030. Lex Lynch, thank you so much for joining the Switched On podcast today.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Lex, I want to just talk about what impact climate change is already having for grassroots football. Can you give me an idea of what is happening on the ground, extremes of weather and whether or not it is disrupting sport?
I can, Anne, and that's a great question. We've actually got a lot of information on that thanks to the broader AFL and footy community. And so I can tell you that since 2020 in the Black Summer bushfires, 595 community footy clubs have required emergency assistance from the AFL, the Australian Football League, due to fires and floods and climate impacts. And I guess to put that into context, there's 3,500, 4,000 community clubs around Australia. So that's about 1 in 7. And we've had examples like the Panmure Footy Club was struck by the 2022 October floods. And so sporting events down in that part of Victoria were put on hold after Mount Emu Creek burst its banks to flood half the oval. Water flooded the Mount Emu and across the reserve and the netball courts, clubrooms and facilities, which means no sport, no footy, which really affects the community. We've seen the Shepparton Swans, likewise, they were destroyed by floods, and the Goulburn River rose above the levee banks for the first time in 50, 60 years, and so the infrastructure becomes submerged in water, leaving them to face a couple of seasons without a home. And for anyone that's a footy fan, there's 11 million of us in Australia, and there's 14, 15 million sports fans. We know how important that is to the way we live and the way we work, the way we talk to each other, and the way we see our friends and family. And so it's a really massive impact, and that's 595 clubs. It's a lot.
That is huge. And so there's obviously a cost to fixing sports grounds after those extreme events. But also, how about extreme weather affecting the ability to play just on a general level?
Yeah, that's also happening. There's a lot of data around the impacts of heat in particular. And so seasons that potentially having to change, and games and training that's been cancelled. My own kids play soccer. I've got a 15 and 12-year-old, and as a coach of their teams as well, I see the guidelines and I can see how much more frequently the we are having to cancel training. We're seeing temperatures that are much higher than they were, and we're seeing the impact on players themselves.
So this is probably a good point to ask, how did Footy for Climate get started? Because I presume it would be in response to what you're seeing happen to climate.
Exactly. So in the wake of the 2020 Black Summer bushfires, two AFL men players, Tom Campbell and Jasper Pittard, saw the impact that it was having on themselves, and also the impact that it was having on community clubs. And so as professional footballers, they had to train indoors for long periods of time. And for them as professional athletes, they of course had the ability and the resources to move training. But these are players that have all, originally come from community clubs, and they loved the communities they came for. And they're also seeing the impact on the grassroots. And they thought, we need to do something about this, and we need to work with the broader footy community to help protect the future of footy. And so really, Footy for Climate connects two things that Aussies care deeply about: our game and our future. We're seeing firsthand how climate impacts are threatening local footy, and our players care because they've lived it. They've trained in unbearable heat. They've played on drought-affected grounds, or they've seen their hometown clubs struggle after extreme weather. They want to protect the game for the next generation of kids coming through.
So what's the mission? What are you trying to achieve with Footy for Climate?
Look, we're taking a practical and no-nonsense approach to focus on the solutions, local clubs and communities and fans. What we're doing is we're showing how climate solutions can strengthen local clubs while continuing to protect the game's future. And so we work with all facets of the broader footy community. We work with the AFL. We work with the AFL Players Association, which is essentially the players' union, and we've found a lot of support from those two bodies in the work that we've been doing. We work with fans. We work with the 1,350 odd AFL men and women players that currently play the game, and we work with community and community clubs. And so, to give you a concrete example, our program called Power Forward, which is about installing solar, battery, and climate solutions at local footy clubs, is already seeing local clubs reduce their power bills, reduce their emissions, and also make sure that they are more resilient in the face of climate change. So for us, it's about protecting what matters to our communities. The local clubs that brings everyone together every weekend and on Tuesday and a Thursday night, while demonstrating these practical solutions that can benefit the whole community.
Let's talk more about playing it forward, because, as you say, it's a really practical example of what sporting organisations can achieve. Give me an example of a sporting club that has been able to turn things around, so to speak. Because I mean, the other, there's not only the issue of future-proofing the clubs. There's obviously energy costs as well, and putting some solar panels on, for instance, is obviously going to help the club lessen its energy costs.
Yeah. Look, we love this program. Power Forward. We had a demonstration, our first program or our first project a couple of months ago at the Mansfield Footy and Netball Club, about an hour and a half or 2 hours out of Melbourne. It was an absolute pleasure to work with the club there that were interested in putting solar panels and batteries on their roofs. And we put up 66 panels, which is 30 kilowatt hours, and a battery is 40 kilowatt, which means that it can soak up the power and the energy when it's been produced during the day to be used in the evening. And for Mansfield Footy Club, their energy bills were $9,000 a year, and their energy bills are now $900 a year.
Great.
And so, to put that in context for what that means on the ground for a local footy club, and anyone who's listening who knows and has volunteered at footy clubs and has paid the bills, especially with energy bills increasing, like $8,000, that's a sponsor for a local footy club. Or as the president of the Mansfield Footy and Netball Club said to us, like that's the equivalent to be able to do concussion testing for all of the clubs at the start of every year. So it has a real impact, and it also means that the local footy club can see the demonstration of how renewable energy can work and can be really beneficial for the community.
Yeah, so that's when it plays it forward. I think I got the name wrong, didn't I? It's Power
Oh,
Forward.
it's hard, and there are so many of them, and there's a lot going around at the moment, and they've all got our sporting and footy parlance there as well.
Yeah. Tell me, how receptive, say, were the Mansfield footy community to having the solar panels? Was it something that they were driving? Was it something that you guys were driving? And what were some of the hurdles, I suppose, that needed to be overcome?
We had very few hurdles with this project, and we want to roll this out over 500 clubs by 2030. But for Mansfield, we had a connection to the club already because Tom Campbell, who now plays for the Melbourne Footy Club, they had their community camp at Mansfield this time last year. Made a connection, loved the club. This is a good example of how a footy club comes to a community and is embedded with them for a couple of days or a week or so, and you can see that the kids and the local players getting to have a kick and see the players and see their heroes in action. And so we reached out to them and said, "You haven't got solar panels. Would you be interested in the pilot?" They jumped straight on board. This project was probably turned around in 4 or 5 months. They were really supportive from the get-go. We had some great partners. We had support from the AFL Players Association and organisations like Easy Being Green. And so look, they were wrapped. And it also means that we can actually celebrate it with the community. There are, what are there, 4.5 million solar panels now in Australia, or 4 million panels, homes with solar panels. There are solar and battery installations that go up every day. But what we bring is this amazing footy community and the ability to have the project at Mansfield and then celebrate it. And so we went up there and we brought along former champion North Melbourne and Melbourne player Benny Brown, premiership player. We also had Greg Madigan, who's a former Hawthorn premiership player and now runs AFL Victoria. The local MP, Cindy McLeish, came along and gave us a shout out at Parliament, which was really generous of her. It's a great way to demonstrate the benefits of renewable energy across a really diverse community.
How important are those footy champions like Tom Campbell in getting projects like this off the ground, do you think?
I think the champion players are, is someone who, I've got kids and I can see the smiles on their face when they get to meet their heroes. I think they're really important in being able to talk to people in a way, as people that are relatable is a really critical part of what they can do. I think to get the projects over the line, we know that these projects make sense from a financial point of view. We know that from a technical point of view, they're not that complicated. We know that clubs are struggling and, are generally run by volunteers. And so there are some good examples of state and federal and other funding that's coming to the table to assist them. So I think the main thing that players can do is bring a sense of excitement. As I mentioned at the start, like while we see, the players who, a lot of young people and even probably older people would see the players out there and wish and dream they could be doing the same as them. The fact is that 1,350 AFL men and women players all come from a bunch of community clubs and all come from communities that they really care about and will happily go back to talk to. And so I think that's where their power is because they love the community that they come from.
And you're trying to get 500 clubs equipped with some renewable resources. Some of those clubs clearly are obviously going to be in regional areas where we are seeing something of a backlash against certainly the utility scale, the big projects, the big batteries, the big solar, the transmission lines, etc. Do you think having those trusted footy players, the guys that so many of us, look up to, women and guys, I should say. Do you think that that really kind of paves the way?
I think there's that broader societal issue that you touch on, Anne, and I think generally there is still, we know, a lot of support for renewable in across all communities. There's definitely opposition in small amounts, and there's definitely ways that the rollout can be done a lot better. And we would support any ways to do that to make sure that communities are engaged and are benefiting properly. I think from the players' perspective, and from Footy for Climate's perspective, the most important thing for us is not so much getting involved in the broader political or social debate, but just making sure that, we can get out there and demonstrate that these projects are of benefit for the clubs, and they can slash the power bills, reduce emissions, and also potentially with things like water management or shading or projects like that, actually make it easier to play the game and make sure that we can keep training and playing.
And also make the clubs more resilient for the future and for the weather we are going to experience, surely.
Exactly. We want to be playing forever.
Mm.
You know, footy is the great social fabric of towns and clubs and communities, and certainly in the footy playing states. But, throughout Australia, this is our Indigenous game, and we want to make sure that we can keep playing forever.
Okay, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back.
G'day, Alex Carey here. The Goodwee ESA all-in-one home storage solution is here, and it's a game changer. It's packed with market-leading features, full home backup and 6-level battery protection. With up to 48 kilowatt hours in a single stack, the ESA is a breeze to install with no gateway needed. The Goodwee ESA series is available now and priced to cover the 2026 drop in the rebate. Visit goodwee.com.au for more information.
My guest today on Switched On is Lex Lynch, the CEO of Footy for Climate, which works with professional AFL and AFLW players as well as community football clubs to help them take action on climate. Lex, how concerned overall are AFL and AFLW players about climate change?
We surveyed AFL men and women players, so professional AFL men and women players, with assistance from the Players Association. We found that 92% are concerned about climate change, which is not, in one sense, when I mentioned that figure, people are a little surprised. I'm not that surprised because this is an 18 to 35, 40-year-old cohort. This is the big issue of the generation. Who would have thought? And the thing is that, there's no silent, majority that are against climate action. The vast majority of people can see that this is a challenge. There are a lot of other concerns and issues that we all have in our lives, but we see this as one of them, and we see that the solutions are available, and that's where we want to move into now. So we can see that players are concerned, and we can see that players want to make a difference, which is why we focus on the ways that we can protect our local clubs and our game for as long as possible.
I suppose it is all about, though, harnessing that 92% of players being concerned about it and how you harness that into something really concrete.
Yeah, yep. And we work with players, and so we hold events with players to just lean into what they're concerned about. So we're not going to be preaching to them or to anyone about, what they should be doing. But if they are concerned and they want to, know what they can do as a player, as someone from a footy club, as someone that, people look up to, we support them in that. We visited the Hamilton Footy and Netball Club earlier in the year with Emma Carney, who is the reigning AFL Premiership captain for the North Melbourne Kangaroos. We went to Hamilton in Western Victoria, where we held an event with a couple of the local MPs. We spoke about the future of footy, and we brought the community together to have a footy clinic, sausage sizzle, all the things that footy clubs do and do so well. And then Emma was able to talk to the community about the people that make the community, the people that make the game tick, and also the concerns that they have and the solutions that they have. It was a fantastic event. That's a really good example of players leading in a space to make sure that their game can live forever.
Yes. Lex, you're relatively new to Footy for Climate. You're obviously a footy fan, but your background is in climate change, climate adaptation, knowledge about energy, etc. You came on board, I understand, last year to Footy for Climate. Does that sort of signify that Footy for Climate is trying to really capitalise and professionalise its climate adaptation agenda?
Yeah, look, I love the game. I'm a footy lover and have been since, first playing here in the in North Melbourne and Errol Street Primary School in the 80s. I work a lot in the climate renewable space, and so Footy for Climate was combining the two things that I love and jumped at the chance. I love the power of sport for community, and I was learning that professional players are engaged and care about this. And so for Footy for Climate, we're really at a stage where we're scaling up. We have a bunch of resources that we have put together that Tom Campbell and Jasper Pittard and some of their, I'll call them Footy for Climate teammates, the likes of Nicola Barr and Izzy Huntington from the Giants, and others that are available. And so there's this amazing podcast called Cool Down, where we brought professional AFL players and climate experts together to discuss these big issues. Go and see the likes of Mitch Lewis and champion Adelaide forward Riley Thilthorpe and Phil Davis, Mel Morris-Dalton. They've also put on a short film called Our Local, and we've also worked with members of Parliament as well to have sort of cross-party events to celebrate what we're doing and also bring people together to make sure we have a bipartisan approach to climate. But our next step is, as you say, to take it to the next level. So we really pack a punch. We've got a lot of great people that work with us and support us. And so that's why we're working on Power Forward and making sure that we can work at the coalface and support the clubs that are the hubs and the grassroots of footy, and also support the players who are the champions that want to make a difference.
I was just thinking about the Power Forward program that you've got. In some ways, it's so crucial, isn't it? Because community clubs don't only help mitigate by shifting to renewables, they actually build what we're all talking about, or a lot of people are talking about, social license and a local culture around climate action when you've got such visible infrastructure upgrading.
You're right, Anne. And when you can actually see that there in the flesh, you can celebrate it. You can see how it works, and it sort of demystifies a lot of what renewable energy is about. You get the on the ground benefits of the energy bills being reduced and the emissions being reduced. You get again what the equivalent of a sponsor to a community club, which is pretty extraordinary. But it's visible, and you can see how this works. And so I think it does play a really big part in helping understand, that this is technology that can work, and this is an approach that can help at the local level, but also help us reduce emissions and meet the climate challenge. And I think that the point you make about the clubs as well being, I guess, hubs or beacons, and everyone knows this. Everyone who is involved or has ever been involved in a footy club will understand the importance of local clubs. They are the heartbeat of communities, and with every disruption, sometimes people don't come back. So we see that not only do the climate impacts affect the actual ability to play the game, but if you've got a volunteer that is, in a flood-prone area or has been impacted by a natural disaster, it's a lot harder for them to then get back involved in the game. And so it really does spread out on this. And so that's why it is so important to make sure that we are doing everything we can to protect the clubs, because if we're protecting footy, we're protecting the community.
With your aim to get 500 clubs with renewable resources, what are you anticipating are going to be the biggest barriers for those clubs in going renewable?
The main barrier for a community club is the upfront cost or capital. Think about a volunteer organisation that is focused on uniforms and making sure that the canteen's properly stocked, and you've got the community volunteers and enough umpires on the day. So the main barrier is that upfront cost. We've done some work with the AFL to survey community clubs around Australia, and also started working with local governments to understand what the need is and how many clubs currently have solar and batteries. And we can see that there is a need and there's a really big demand and a hell of a lot of potential. We've been working with an organisation called Cricket for Climate and a person by the name of Pat Cummins, who is probably the second most important leader in Australia after Prime Minister generally. Pat Cummins is the captain of the Australian cricket team, and he started this organisation because he likewise, he's concerned about this issue. He's played in extreme heat and playing in more extreme heat and wants to help his sport and cricket survive and thrive. And so Pat Cummins and Joanna Bowen, the CEO of Cricket for Climate, have been instrumental in working with the federal government to help support clubs. And a program was announced a couple of months ago called Game On that we were involved in as well with some other organisations to try and advocate for this funding. And so there's $50 million coming the way of sporting clubs around Australia over the next couple of years, which is a great start, a great way to help clubs actually cover the cost of the paddles and the batteries or maybe the LED lighting. And so that'll go a long way to help getting it started. And we're also looking at other avenues, and so talking to potential funders or even looking at financing options and just trying to make it as simple as possible too. So while the funding can be a barrier, the other one is making sure that we can assist and not make it too time consuming for a club, because what we can see in Mansfield is the benefit is there once the project's complete. Let's help and make sure that, that's our mission, to make sure that we can help them and make it as easy as possible.
Because I would think that a lot of clubs would need that additional help, because I mean, even for householders, they're finding, a number of people, they do believe in renewables, or they want to fully electrify their home. But a lot of people say, one, the cost is an issue, and two, I don't know where to start. And, actually, once you start doing solar panels and batteries, you do need expertise to be able to pull that off. And, you've got to get the right installer. I mean, it's the same issue for houses, but you're probably also dealing with sporting committees. So you've got to get everybody on side.
You're right. And I think if that's a critical piece, right, to make sure that we're talking to all of those key stakeholders. And so it's the club itself. And look, we've had a lot of interests, and we were able to find out through that survey with the AFL what those barriers were and how we can get around them. Also through discussions with councils and also through our own power forward expression of interest. So for anyone that's interested, we're at the process now, at the stage now where we're after expressions of interest from clubs that want to take the next step. And, we're hearing that there is this demand and this need, and we'll make sure that we can assist as much as possible with the funding. But as you say, also with that sort of engagement and the connections, because most footy clubs are on local government leased land, or they've got seasonal agreements because, think about it, they often play in footy, and then you've got the cricket club that comes in summer. So there's actually an opportunity to work together to benefit all codes and all sports and make sure that we can assist as much as possible so it doesn't become a logistical challenge. It's a solved problem, man. This has happened so many times before. There's some great work that the likes of RACV Solar have done over the past, a couple of years ago, with Andy McCarthy, whose name will be known to many people. You can see some of the work that he did. We've seen that councils are able to bring clubs together and, look at aggregating funding applications. And so we think there's a great opportunity to make this happen.
Yeah. Lex Lynch, thank you so much for joining the Switched On podcast.
Pleasure. Thanks, Anne.
And Lex Lynch is the CEO of Footy for Climate. Check out Footy for Climate's website if you want to see how their Power Forward program is helping clubs across the country. I'm Anne Delaney. You've been listening to Switched On Australia. Catch you next time when we explore more people, ideas and solutions shaping our clean energy future.